Rob Thompson here, Game Plan You today. We got Lonnie Sweet over there. Happy Monday, Lonnie.
Happy Monday, Robert.
So, Lonnie, you were on the show. I mean, we've been friends for 20 something years, but you were on the show about a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. And so I just wanted to reconnect with you, but more importantly, share your story a little bit and talk about the space that you are in as a culinary marketing executive slash branding in the culinary hospitality space. But you
Yep.
spent most of your career, or a good portion of your career, on the sports side with IMG and Wolf Associates. Were you there with them for a while?
Yeah,
And,
I was at
and
Wolf
SFX.
when I first got out of college. I worked at Wolf, and then at Tennis Hall of Fame, and then SFX, and then eventually transitioned over to IMG for a handful of years. Yeah,
Yeah, so I think what's interesting because, as most of my guests are in the sports media space, but culinary is such a big part of the overall hospitality experience. And I think you have the greatest quote in the world: "Not everybody loves sports, but everybody loves to eat," or something like that.
everybody has to eat. Yeah, you don't have to
Has
love
to eat.
food. You don't have to love you don't have to love entertainment, but everybody has to eat. Yeah,
Nice. So talk about it. So talk about the space right now. I mean,
yeah.
obviously the devastation with restaurants and the industry, but how are you pivoting, and how is your clients pivoting? And talk about your clients a little bit.
That's a good loaded question right now. So, yeah, like you said, the first decade of my career is spent in sports. I tell people all the time I'm a proud sales guy, right? So, selling at that time, selling athletes, coaches, and broadcasters. When I started the Connect Group 12 years ago, it was actually my 12-year anniversary. I think a couple weeks ago or last week. We started in sports. I named the company Connect Sports and Entertainment because my business was really all about my connections and my network and the people that I know and the relationships that I've been able to maintain over the years. So I went out of the gate selling, sponsorships and bringing opportunities, just being a connector of brands and resources just to kind of go generate revenue. About 3 years into that, I met a guy named Mark Forgione who was just about to win a show called Next Iron Chef. At the time, putting him into this kind of pantheon of culinary experts. We kind of hit it off, and I started representing Mark as his agent, his business manager, and then fast forward, 10 years later. My businesses call it, 90% in this culinary space. Primarily, but probably about 70% of it representing chefs. Mark Forgione, Ludo Lefebvre in LA, Michelle Bernstein in Miami, Tiffany Faison in Boston, Nina Compton in New Orleans, a really great, amazing chef, outdoorsman, Eduardo Garcia in Bozeman, Montana, who also happens to be an amputee and a cancer survivor. Melissa Benishai, Baked by Melissa, Mary Giuliani, a bunch of other really, really talented chefs across the country. And for my business, really acting as their agent business manager. So finding them, brand marketing opportunities and hospitality and TV shows and kind of helping them figure out what their career path is. So that's a long way of saying that it's been a really crazy time, right? Because other than the federal government, the restaurant industry is the largest employer in the United States. It's something like 13, 14, 15 million people. So um, during COVID, most of these places, especially in the hub cities, have just shut down. And so all of my clients that had restaurants, every single one of them shut down. Every single one of them had to furlough or let go of their employees. So rethinking kind of what my business is, because we can't do hospitality right now as it used to be. So doing a lot more digital experiences. I think people are looking for more culinary content in their home. I think everybody's getting bored of making the same 4 or 5 shitty meals. We're on whatever day 40 or 50 quarantine right now, so I think brands are, and people are looking for culinary content, which has been interesting. We were just talking about before we hopped on. I mean, we'll see in a couple months, right? I think trying to rethink our business and rethink how our clients are engaging with their customers, both in the restaurant setting and a hospitality setting, I think will be um, really the key to kind of how we move forward.
Do you see high end culinary direct, not like direct fresh, but direct meals right to people's homes as a thing now that you're getting used to ordering out and getting delivery? I mean, is that part of the conversation of a new business model for some of your clients?
Yeah, I listen. I think takeout's always been a large part of it, right? Whether that takeout is a high-end meal or one of these meal kits, right? It's really hard. Even before we got into this, this situation, that's such a big part of the business that's growing. The challenge is it's not really the same thing because somebody else is cooking it, right? And so, if Mark Forgione has got, he's got a chili lobster at restaurant Mark Forgione, that's kind of been his signature dish. He can package it up and he can freeze it and he can send it to somebody and they can recook it. The challenge is there's so many ways to mess that meal up from the time he freezes it to the time they put it in their mouth that potentially could reflect his brand, right? And so in the past, it's always been about like, hey, is it going to damage or is it potentially going to take an ass out of a seat, right? We're always thinking about how do we put asses in seats. And so you've got to be really careful that the process of delivery that when they're eating it, it's as good or better than you want them to say, man, I can't wait for them to get back open so I can go try the real thing. What you don't want to have them do is, man, that was really bad. And maybe Mark's not as good of a cook as he is, and I'm not going to go to his restaurant, if that all makes sense, right? The experience and the quality is very hard to maintain. And so when we talk about these things, that is a conversation we're having a lot, right? Like, but how do we make sure that we maintain the same quality when they're actually eating it?
What are some of the other things that been in the discussion now with some of your chefs and their business models? Are they now looking to be more aggressive in the digital space, like you said, of sharing recipes, homes, just maybe cooking schools online, or is that something that's kind of on the radar now? Or
It's funny, man. We most of the events that we always do in the past have been at their restaurants or one to 50, right? So it's been a group of people, and they're doing a demo for them, and then they're eating their dinner. What I've found really interesting, and we're doing a bunch of these kind of digital experiences where we're sending private links to people, right, and then they can cook alongside with the chef. Never before now, it's been, I'm going to cook for you, you're going to then eat my food. It's never been, let's cook together and then we're going to eat the food that we made together, which I think is really interesting. Mark's been doing a bunch of these, and he's been doing a meatball with a 10-minute sauce um, and some other side dishes, right? And he's cooking it with people, and people are cooking it at their home, and then they're eating it together, which I think is really neat. It's a really neat kind of way to experience a chef way that they didn't do before. I always tell people when we were in sports and athletes, right, they're not really attainable, right? It's very hard to feel like you can be like them. You know what I mean? There's only one LeBron James, or there's only one Michael Jordan, or there's only one Peyton Manning. But when you cook from a chef's cookbook, you can almost feel like you're on par with them, right? And so to be able to cook with them, you almost feel like you can do what they can do. And I think that's a really interesting kind of emotional component. It creates a different relationship because you can have a different conversation with a chef, right, than you would with an athlete. When I remember back in the day, we used to do autographs, and it was really quick. Like, oh my God, I love you. That game was amazing. My son or my daughter loves you. Take a picture and move on. When you're with a chef, like, you can actually ask questions, right? Like, oh man, I made your recipe the other day. I don't know what happened, but maybe I oversalted the meatballs. Can you give me some advice on how to make a better sauce? And it's more interactive. And I think this digital experience is allowing that to kind of unfold, which is really neat.
sorry about that for that delay, but do you find that by the way, I think that's awesome. My mind was spinning on that too. Is how do you incorporate? Is this something that they're doing from a live streaming on
Yeah.
platforms like this, or are they doing it from YouTube, or do you find that now patron is, where you're paying for exclusive content? Do you find that that's a whole huge revenue stream upside for you guys?
I mean, we'll see, right? I mean, they're using Zoom, using Vimeo, using House Party, using some of these other places. So that's how we've been doing it. I don't know what that's going to evolve to, right? I think
Yeah.
the interesting part of times that we're in right now is it forces people to rethink things, right? Like, again, 2008, there were so many businesses that were created right during that time period when we were in this close to recession or whatever it may be. So I don't know. We'll see if that evolves. I think that the content play has got to be a paid model, right? I think there's a lot of free stuff out there, which is really interesting, right? Like, Ludo in LA, who's my client, is doing a ton of stuff on Instagram Live and crushing it right now, right? Like, it's really getting a ton of traction and people are really loving it. It's my job now to figure out how to monetize that, right? And so, is there brand integrations? What do those analytics look like? How do you scale that to make it even bigger? Is there a private play to it, right? Like, again, these digital experiences that we've been doing have been all private, right? So it's 1 to 40 people. We send them a link. And sometimes we're sending them food, meaning we're sending them the actual chef kits, right? So they'll get all the food and then they'll get the recipe and then you'll cook alongside with it. Other times we're sending them the recipe with an ingredient list that they can go purchase. So it's different, man. But again, I think we've all got to figure out how to. I hate the word new normal. I hate the fact it's part of our current vernacular, but we really need to figure out what our new normal is.
So I don't know if I told you. Well, this is not normal, but I'm going to tell you this one. So there's a deli in my hometown that named this sandwich after me. If you didn't know, right?
I'm not surprised.
So it's broccoli Rob. So it's the broccoli Rob Thompson sandwich, right? So, right, it's classic.
I
So
love
it's
it.
broccoli Rob, chicken cutlets, roasted red peppers, provolone, and just because I'm Irish and I didn't know what else to put in there, I put a little honey mustard to cut the bitterness of the broccoli Rob, right? So
By the way,
of
it's an
course,
underappreciated cheese, provolone.
I agree,
It's an
100%.
underappreciated cheese. It's
It's
one of my
got
favorite cheeses. I love it.
it's got great saltiness to it. Anyway, so I posted that sandwich, right? And I'm pretty aggressive in my social media, distribution. That one picture got more likes than anything else I put effort into this, Lonnie, right?
Yeah,
There's
man.
effort. There's more likes off of that one chicken cutlet broccoli Rob sandwich. I don't know, it was like a couple hundred. Like, so to your point, I guess there's definitely this emotional attachment to food, the food that we cook, the food we grew up with. It's a connection to us and our heritage and our lives
Yep.
and yada yada yada. Everything you talk about. I see that in that space, what's happening now in this kind of counterculture that's happening in social media, that people are posting things that they're cooking, things that they miss out from restaurants. I mean, that is, I would have to say, 80% of the content that are coming through feeds right now,
Yeah,
So
for sure.
knowing that, I mean, obviously, these guys, just them in that space, does that strategy for you go back to them and say, listen, guys, I've told you this is an important space that we've needed to figure out and be in right now? I mean, what's your conversations moving forward is saying, this has to be part of our business model, whatever we decide to do, however we brand this, however we kind of loop in brands, whether it's a macaroni company or the olive oil company or whatever it is.
Yeah.
We have to figure out when we could do this kind of content because this is going to help us in case this happens again.
Yeah, listen, we've been doing that for a while, Rob. I mean, to be honest with you, right? Social has become such a large piece of every deal that we do already. Um, I will say a bunch of my chefs. Let me unroll this even a little bit more, right? Like you have content creators, and then you have people that are on social media, right? At least in my world, you want to call an influencer, right? An influencer, that doesn't have a necessary expertise like a chef is really a content creator, right? And that's what they're good at, right? Like the really good ones they might as well be television script writers. They're just doing it for themselves, and they're starring in their sole show, right? With my chefs, for most of my clients, they're real experts in the kitchen. And so it's unnatural for them to do social media, right? Or they just don't have the time, right? Like Forgione or Nina or Ludo, like they're in the kitchen 6 days a week, right? Like they don't have their phone on them. They're cooking, they're talking to purveyors, they're running a restaurant. So they don't really have the time to create content. They do right now. And so that was one of the first conversations I had with everybody was like, listen, we always talk about not having enough time to write a book. We always talk about not having enough time to think about social media. We always talk about things about not having enough time. Well, you have time now, right? So let's get on thinking about what kind of book you want to write and start writing it, right? We want to talk about, what kind of content you want to put out there, have it be natural, have it be honest, have it be you. Let's just do it, right? And so, Forge is a great example, man. I had to pull teeth to get him to post content because it's just not him. He is doing it every day right now. His numbers are tracking up. Same thing with Nina and Michelle and Ludo. Ludo is crushing it on social media right now. The idea, though, of and I hope this changes, man. I got to be honest with you. I really hope it changes, right? Like my world, when you talk about influencer deals, is based on numbers, right? Everybody always says, all right, well, you got 100,000 followers. Here's our CPM. Here's our equation. They're just buying eyeballs, right? And I think that's the challenge with the influencer model is that you really don't have to be an expert as long as you've got numbers. And so we've always said, well, listen, those numbers don't equate, right? Like our guys, Ford Jones got 40,000 followers. He's not doing a post for $500 because that's the equation that you figured out in your algorithm or in your metrics, right? He's an expert, and so you want to have him go talk about how to create dishes or what to do around Easter or how to use your pantry or purveyors or running a restaurant or whatever it may be. Like there's more value to that, and so I think what's happening, I hope what's happening this whole time period is that we're going to get back to that because there's a lot of ways to buy eyeballs. You don't really need an influencer with a couple million followers to get eyeballs. You can buy them. I mean, you can go to Instagram, you can go to Twitter, you can go to Facebook or TikTok or House Party or whatever it may be, put some money in and buy eyeballs. I think what I'm hoping is that people go back to an influencer as an expert. Like I always say to people, I've got a 12-year-old daughter. The idea that she's getting makeup advice from another 12-year-old girl, right, is mind blowing to me. Like this girl's got no experience, but there you got Bobby Brown, who's been doing it for 40 years, who's the foregone expert, and my daughter has no clue who she is. I'm hoping that Bobby Brown is going to start getting a lot more traction right now because she is an expert. And I hope that the influencers go back to that side. If that was a long-winded answer.
It's perfect because there's a difference between smart content and just noise content, and
Right.
there definitely is a science behind it and an art behind it,
Of course.
but do you see yourself developing? And you may already have it, and I don't know. Could you aggregate all of your talent under one digital umbrella and create your own quote unquote connect food network, so to speak?
I could. I've tried something similar a couple of years ago. It's very hard because they all have different thoughts and they all have different. I mean, I can go out and say to Brand X, like I've got these 8 chefs, and together they've got 500,000 followers. Like, give us X amount of budget, and then I'll go figure it out for sure. We're doing that already. Being able to sell a similar creative across all our chefs, it doesn't necessarily always fit, right? Like Ludo's personality is very different than Mary Giuliani's personality. Mark is very different than Nina from different. So like being able to sell in singular creative across multiple chefs doesn't always make sense for the brand. But we're starting to get creative for sure. We're trying to figure out new ways to bring out more scale and sell more across our chefs, across our talent for sure.
Nice.
We have to,
Well,
man, right? I mean, the
you
reality
have
is we
to.
have to, right? And so I think the challenging part with all this is rethinking your business means really rethinking your business, right? Like for me, I don't think it's saying, do I get out of culinary or do I get out of sport? It's just saying, like, how can I take what I know over the last 20 years, right? And know that I've got a great base with chefs and I know a lot in the sports world. What are kind of those white spaces, right? And what's going to happen in 2 years from now? And like, how do we protect shit from happening like it's happening to us right now? So it forces you to reflect. I don't think it's a bad thing. It's a scary thing, but it forces you to reflect.
Well, it does reflect. I mean, I reflect and just stay in the game and be positive every day, and let the market dictate where you're going. And I think you have a book in you too, Mister. So you go write your book.
I have the name already. I just don't know what the hell it's going to be inside.
Really?
Yeah,
What's the name?
I'm
You want
not
to give it
giving it to
away?
you now. What if somebody takes and then writes the actual book?
That's true. That's true
Give me
too.
some time. Give me time.
All right. Well, I'm counting on you to do it. So listen, if this knucklehead could write a book, well, guide, you know,
You're a
anybody could
smart
do
man.
it.
You're a very
I
smart man.
know.
Anytime
Yeah, I
you put
know.
your face on the cover of a book, too, it's going to work. You're a beautiful smart man.
I know. I heard that chip too. I didn't know. So, Lonnie, sweet. Thank you so much, buddy, for your
You
time
got it, Robbie.
today. Happy Monday, and best of luck. How do people reach you?
They can go to my website, theconnectgrp.com, or they can send me an email at lsweet@theconnectgrp.com.
Beautiful. But I'll put it in the link down below as well
Okay.
on YouTube, so people will be able to connect with you quickly. Lonnie,
Thank
thank
you.
you again for your time, buddy. Best of luck with you.
All right, Robbie. Some of us in the family.